The moment the cameras caught it, no one could look away. A tug of the hand, barely more than a gesture, but one that spoke volumes. It wasn't just a hand being pulled. It was a story, a crack in the polished surface of what the world has long imagined as a flawless royal couple. Have you ever seen someone's private struggle explode into public view in the blink of an eye? That's exactly what happened at the Dodgers game when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were caught on camera. And it wasn't subtle. It was tense. It was raw. It was undeniable. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The stadium was alive. The sun was bright over Los Angeles, the perfect setting for a baseball game. Laughter, cheers, families enjoying a sunny afternoon. But beneath that ordinary scene, something extraordinary, or perhaps extraordinarily troubling, was unfolding. Fans recorded snippets on their phones, unaware that what they were capturing would soon make headlines worldwide. It wasn't just the spectacle of celebrity at play. It was an intimate moment of conflict, a window into a relationship the public thinks it knows, suddenly exposed in all its fragile complexity. Imagine being there, in the stands, witnessing what many could only speculate about from afar. People talk about the pressures of public life, but seeing it happen live, feeling the tension in the air, seeing hands that usually rest in gentle clasp jerk apart, it's a jolt. A reminder that behind the smiles, the charity work, and the carefully curated Instagram posts, there are real people with real emotions. And when those emotions spill into public view, the effect is electric. Have you ever wondered what someone's hand tug might reveal? What it can whisper about loyalty, frustration, and hidden resentments? In the first moments of that exchange, it was subtle. A glance, a small movement. Harry and Meghan were walking through the concourse, mingling with friends and family, trying to blend into the crowd. But cameras have a way of finding what you want to keep private. And this time, they captured it all. The hand tug was like a spark in dry grass. Tiny, seemingly inconsequential, but enough to ignite speculation. And, soon after, a global conversation. People began debating. Was it playful teasing? A micro-expression of annoyance? Or a sign of something deeper, something the couple had been managing quietly away from the public eye? We're conditioned to believe that royal appearances are scripted, polished, and devoid of personal conflict. But what if the very image we cling to is a carefully constructed illusion? What if the cracks we see in fleeting moments, a hand pulled away, a brief frown, a quick glance of frustration, are evidence that life behind the cameras is far more human, messy, and dramatic than we are led to believe? And that's exactly what makes this moment so riveting. Not because it's scandalous, although, of course, it is, but because it's real. Because it reminds us that love, partnership, and the pressures of life in the public eye can collide in ways we never anticipated. Let's rewind just a bit. The Dodgers game wasn't supposed to be anything more than an afternoon of enjoyment. Harry and Meghan, known for their public appearances that balanced celebrity with royalty, had chosen to attend a game, a classic American pastime. They were there with friends, with security, and, of course, with cameras capturing every step. The setting was perfect for a couple that's become global news. Sunny weather, a lively crowd, the laughter of thousands, the distant crack of a bat striking a ball. And yet, in the midst of this idyllic scene, tension was simmering. You see, public conflicts are rarely spontaneous. They often have roots in private disagreements, misunderstandings, and unspoken frustrations. And while we, as outsiders, can only speculate, moments like the hand tug give us a glimpse into the undercurrent of a relationship constantly scrutinized by the world. We watch, we analyze, we debate, because human beings are naturally drawn to drama, especially when it's wrapped in fame and power. But there's a deeper question here. What happens when the public becomes a witness to the private, and what are the consequences for those involved? Fans didn't just see a hand being pulled. They saw a narrative unfolding in real time. Social media erupted almost instantly. Clips went viral, each frame analyzed and dissected by experts and amateurs alike. Body language specialists weighed in, dissecting Harry's stance, Meghan's expressions, the tension in their shoulders. People debated what the gesture meant. Was it anger? Was it irritation? Was it playful teasing that went too far? The ambiguity added fuel to a fire that nobody wanted to put out. And as you know, ambiguity sells. Curiosity sells. That tiny moment became a lens through which the world could examine not only this couple, but the human condition itself, the struggle between personal emotion and public persona. The beauty of this story isn't just the public argument caught on camera. It's the contrast between expectation and reality. We expect royals to be composed, to smile, to present a facade of unity. And when that facade cracks, when something as simple as a hand tug exposes tension, it feels monumental. People are drawn to it because it shatters the myth. And isn't that what makes gossip irresistible? We see in someone else's life the things we recognize in our own: frustration, impatience, miscommunication, the quiet tug-of-war that exists in every relationship. But here's the twist. While social media was exploding, there were layers beneath what was visible on screen. Insiders whispered, analysts speculated, and the public imagined scenarios that may or may not have been true. Each theory was more compelling than the last. Some argued it was an innocuous moment blown out of proportion. Others claimed it revealed long-standing tension, the culmination of stress, public scrutiny, and the inherent challenges of blending celebrity culture with royal duties. And that's exactly the kind of drama that keeps people glued to their screens, refreshing feeds, rewinding videos, and debating endlessly. Now, let's consider why this story matters in 2025. It's not just a viral moment. It's a reflection of the evolving public fascination with the British royal family, Harry and Meghan's unique place in that narrative, and the growing tension between public perception and private reality. Every appearance, every gesture, every minor disagreement is scrutinized to an almost absurd degree. And yet, when a moment like this occurs, raw, authentic, and visible to millions, it cuts through the noise and demands attention. We find ourselves asking, what does this reveal about their marriage, their personalities, their strategies for handling pressure? And perhaps most importantly, what does it reveal about the cost of living life under a microscope? Think about the phrase, "don't hold my hands." On the surface, it seems simple, almost mundane. But in the context of a public spat, it becomes loaded with meaning. It can convey frustration, rejection, or a plea for independence. It's a verbal expression of tension that complements the physical gestures already captured. And when combined with body language, a slight pull, a tense jaw, a fleeting frown, the story becomes multidimensional. The audience doesn't just watch, they interpret, project, and emotionally engage. They fill in the gaps with their imagination, their experiences, their biases. And that, in turn, heightens curiosity. And here's the thing. This isn't the first time Harry and Meghan have been scrutinized, but it might be one of the most telling. Public appearances are usually carefully choreographed, scripted even. But this moment was unscripted, unfiltered, spontaneous. And that rawness makes it magnetic. There's no acting here. There's no PR team smoothing over the edges. There's tension, human tension, laid bare for everyone to see. And as the cameras rolled, capturing each micro-expression, each subtle pull of a hand, the world was suddenly invited into an intimate moment, a moment that would spark debates, analyses, and endless speculation for days, weeks, and likely months to come. But what makes this even more intriguing is what came before the hand tug. How did Harry and Meghan arrive at this moment? Were there small, almost imperceptible signs earlier in the day? Glances exchanged, tones of voice, shifts in posture? Observant fans swear they noticed a tension in the way they walked together, subtle cues that something was brewing beneath the surface. And when the hand pull occurred, it wasn't an isolated incident. It was the apex of an unfolding story, one that the cameras caught just in time. And that's why we're here today, to dissect, analyze, and explore every nuance of that Dodgers game moment. Because what looks like a minor gesture on a sunny afternoon in Los Angeles is actually a window into the complexities of a couple constantly under scrutiny, the pressures of fame and royalty, and the ways personal conflict can erupt in public, sometimes in ways that change everything. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The moment had arrived. The stadium lights shimmered over the field as the Dodgers game roared to life, but no one was watching the ball. Everyone's eyes were on them. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle had arrived, hand in hand at first, smiling for the cameras, waving to fans. The crowd erupted. Phones clicked. Social media feeds ignited. But beneath those smiles, a tension simmered, invisible yet palpable, waiting to be caught by the ever-watchful lens of the camera. Have you ever noticed how the public only sees the surface? A perfect photo, a charming wave, a laugh caught at just the right second. But what happens in between the snapshots, in the quiet micro-moments, tells the real story. And this day, at this game, the cameras were merciless in capturing exactly that. From the moment Harry and Meghan entered the stadium, the energy shifted. It wasn't just the presence of royals that changed the atmosphere. It was the tension between them. You could feel it, almost like electricity in the air. It started subtly. A glance here, a slight pull of the hand there. At first, it could have been interpreted as playful banter. But anyone who spent years analyzing micro-movements knows that the subtleties matter. The way Meghan's hand recoiled slightly when Harry shifted closer. The tightening of Harry's jaw as he tried to maintain composure. Moments like these are fleeting, often missed by the untrained eye, yet they speak volumes. What could possibly provoke this in a public setting? Was it the cameras? The crowd? Or was it something far more personal, something that had been building behind closed doors for months? Fans in the stands started whispering, pointing, nudging each other. Phones were raised instinctively, not just to record, but to document the tension. There's a peculiar thrill in witnessing a story unfold in real time, especially one that the public isn't supposed to see. We are voyeurs by nature. We crave authenticity in a world obsessed with carefully curated appearances. And on this day, authenticity, raw and unpolished, was on full display. The opening minutes of the game were a balancing act. Harry tried to engage with fans, answering questions with his usual charm. Meghan smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something was off, and it didn't take a professional observer to notice. They were performing the script that the public expected, happy, relaxed, approachable. But underneath the performance, tension pulsed like a silent drumbeat. It grew with every interaction, every cheer, every camera flash. Could the average spectator sense it? Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, the energy of unease permeated the crowd. Then it happened. A subtle shift, a movement almost imperceptible, yet the cameras froze it forever. Meghan pulled her hand back. Harry's eyes narrowed. The interaction lasted a split second, but for those watching closely, it was a revelation. This wasn't just a disagreement. This was a window into an intimate argument exposed to a global audience. And just like that, the tone of the day shifted. The stadium, which had been filled with laughter and cheers, now seemed like a stage for tension, for a story that was as captivating as it was unsettling. Let's pause here. Why does a simple hand pull become a worldwide spectacle? Because humans are wired to read conflict. We notice discrepancies. We notice when behavior deviates from the expected norm. Royals, especially Harry and Meghan, are supposed to be composed, charming, perfect in the public eye. When that perfection cracks, the audience leans in instinctively. And the media is there to amplify every nuance. Every whisper of movement becomes a headline. Every slight change in posture becomes fodder for analysis. It's fascinating and terrifying, but the story doesn't end with a single gesture. It escalates. The couple move to their seats, trying to regain composure. Harry attempted a light joke, the kind that usually elicits laughter, a way to defuse tension. But Meghan's response was delayed, her smile thin, her laugh unconvincing. What would have been a normal moment for any couple became amplified under the weight of global scrutiny. Every subtle cue, every micro-expression, every slight gesture was magnified. The cameras didn't blink. They didn't look away. And the world watched. Social media, predictably, erupted. Clips were shared instantly. Comments ranged from light-hearted speculation, classic couple moment, to darker theories, suggesting deep-rooted tension. Body language experts weighed in within hours. Fans debated endlessly. Was Meghan annoyed? Was Harry frustrated? Or was this all a fleeting disagreement, nothing more? The ambiguity fueled curiosity. It always does. And it kept viewers glued to the feeds, refreshing timelines, watching the replay over and over, dissecting every second. But what makes this moment particularly remarkable isn't just the hand tug. It's the context. Harry and Meghan's relationship has long been a subject of fascination and speculation. Every interview, every public appearance, every photograph has been scrutinized to an almost absurd degree. And yet, Even in this climate of scrutiny, moments like this retain their power because they feel unfiltered, unscripted, and undeniably human. It's a rare glimpse behind the curtain, a reminder that these people, royalty, celebrities, global icons, are still navigating the complexities of love, stress, and human emotion just like everyone else. Meanwhile, in the stands, reactions varied. Some fans cheered, oblivious to the tension. Some whispered in hushed tones, recognizing the subtle discord. Others recorded the moment, replaying it on their phones, sharing it immediately online. And then came the analysts, the ones who study microexpressions, posture, and gestures, noting every detail. Harry's hand clenching, Meghan's eyes narrowing, the brief pause before they resumed their handshake. It was a symphony of nonverbal communication, and every movement carried meaning. What was happening between them in that moment? Was it a minor irritation blown up by circumstance, or was it indicative of something deeper, something we hadn't seen before? And then, just as the first pitch was thrown, a shift occurred. Harry leaned closer, Meghan leaned back. Their movements weren't violent or aggressive, but they were telling. The subtle tension, almost invisible to the casual observer, was palpable. You could almost feel it from the screen, a silent struggle for personal space, for control, for emotional expression in a world that scrutinizes every move. It's rare to see such a delicate battle exposed so publicly, and that's what makes this story unforgettable. Let's consider the psychological angle for a moment. Humans are wired to detect conflict. We read faces, gestures, and tones to make sense of relationships, intentions, and emotional states. When someone's hand is pulled, even gently, it communicates a range of possibilities: frustration, boundary setting, irritation, or even playful teasing. Context matters, but the cameras removed context. The crowd amplified perception, and the public, millions of people watching online, filled in the gaps with their imagination, biases, and assumptions. It became a narrative before the couple even had a chance to speak. What happened next would escalate the drama even further. Meghan's response was almost imperceptible, yet it was enough to keep viewers on edge. A subtle shake of her head, a quick glance to the side, gestures that might have been missed entirely in any other setting, were captured, magnified, and interpreted endlessly. Harry's expression hardened for a fraction of a second, revealing tension that most of the audience hadn't anticipated. And in that instant, a public spat was born. It's fascinating to think about the dual realities at play here. The couple's internal reality, private and complex, and the external reality, amplified, dissected, and consumed by millions. How often do we see these dual realities in our own lives? How often do our private disagreements get exposed, misinterpreted, or blown out of proportion? Harry and Meghan's situation is extreme because the stakes are extreme. But the emotions, the frustrations, the tiny conflicts, they're universal. And that's what makes watching this unfold both compelling and relatable. Fans and commentators were quick to note the irony. Here was a couple who left royal duties, ostensibly to gain independence, attending a public event where every gesture is under scrutiny. And yet, even in this attempt at normalcy, normalcy itself became impossible. Every movement, every glance, every hand gesture was magnified, analyzed, and debated. The tension of the game, combined with the tension between the couple, created a spectacle that would dominate headlines and social media discussions for days. But then, something happened that no one expected. Just as the stadium was settling into the rhythm of the game, Meghan did something subtle, a movement, a gesture, that would ignite another wave of speculation. The cameras caught it, of course. The fans noticed. And in that brief instant, the story shifted from a minor spat to something far more intriguing. Something that hinted at the deeper dynamics between the two, dynamics the public had speculated about for years, but never seen this clearly. And that's where we pause. Because what came next, the moment that would leave fans talking, theorizing, and analyzing for weeks, is where the story truly begins. Have you ever seen something so small, so fleeting, yet so full of meaning, that it instantly changes the way you perceive an entire situation? That's exactly what happened when Meghan Markle's hand recoiled from Harry's grasp. Emotion so subtle, most people would have missed it if they weren't watching frame by frame. But for those paying attention, it wasn't just a hand moving. It was a statement. It was frustration, it was tension, it was emotion, all rolled into one micro-movement. And for the world watching, it became a moment impossible to ignore. It began innocuously enough. Harry reached out, placing his hand over hers. The gesture meant, perhaps, to reassure, to connect, or even to defuse the tension that had been building. But Meghan didn't reciprocate in the usual way. Her fingers twitched, then pulled back, almost imperceptibly. The difference between touch and withdrawal is subtle, yet powerful. And it said something. She didn't want to be held. Not in that moment. Not in that setting. Not publicly. We often underestimate the power of hands. Psychologists say that hand gestures reveal our true feelings more reliably than words. A clenched fist can signal anger, a hand tug can communicate rejection, and a gentle touch can be a quiet plea for understanding. In this case, Meghan's small motion became a visual representation of conflict, magnified by the cameras and analyzed by millions online. People began replaying the clip, trying to decode the meaning. Was it a simple annoyance? A playful pushback? Or was it the tip of an iceberg, revealing years of stress and tension under a global microscope? Harry's reaction was telling. He didn't pull away immediately. Instead, there was a pause, a subtle tightening of his jaw, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. It's the pause that fascinates experts the most. Moments like these are split seconds, yet they reveal so much about dynamics between people. He wasn't angry in a violent sense, but there was a visible spike in tension, a physiological reaction that betrayed his internal state. You could almost feel the heartbeat behind the gesture, the electricity in the space between them. Have you noticed how couples often communicate more with touch than words? A squeeze of a hand, a gentle push, even a reluctant pull. These gestures carry emotional weight far beyond the surface. And for a couple like Harry and Meghan, whose every action is observed, every motion becomes amplified. Their lives are a constant performance. And yet, in that tiny tug, the performance cracked. The hand moved away, but the message traveled across screens worldwide. Something was amiss. But let's dig deeper. What was happening psychologically in that moment? Meghan's withdrawal could be seen as a boundary-setting act. It said, "I am not engaging in this right now. I need space." Harry's pause, his hesitancy, was his body processing the unexpected rejection, the breach of what he might have expected to be a shared gesture. These subtle exchanges, while seemingly mundane, form the bedrock of human communication. And when they play out publicly, they invite speculation, interpretation, and sometimes misinterpretation on a global scale. Fans and commentators noticed other small cues too. Meghan's shoulders stiffened. Harry's posture shifted slightly forward, as if to compensate for the distance created. Eyes darted briefly between them. Every micro-expression, every twitch, every subtle motion became a chapter in a story the world was reading for the first time. And it was mesmerizing. Because, in real life, these moments happen constantly. But they're usually private. Rarely do we get to witness them unfiltered, in slow motion, under the scrutiny of millions of viewers. The drama escalated subtly. They moved to their seats, the physical distance growing ever so slightly. Harry tried to engage her with a light joke, a small attempt to bridge the space created by that tug. Meghan's response was minimal, almost perfunctory. And in that response, or lack thereof, lay a tension that was impossible to ignore. You could sense the undercurrent, a mix of frustration, disappointment, and perhaps even a hint of resignation. The body, as they say, doesn't lie, and the cameras captured it all. It's fascinating to see how public gestures can be interpreted differently by millions of people simultaneously. Some viewers saw a playful, teasing interaction, a couple's minor squabble played out in the open. Others interpreted it as a sign of deep-seated tension, a reflection of unresolved conflict in a relationship under extraordinary pressure. And then there were experts who pointed to micro-signals, like Meghan's eye movement, the twitch of her wrist, and Harry's brief frown, suggesting that something more than a casual disagreement was unfolding. Think about this. How often do we communicate our feelings through small, almost invisible gestures? A reluctant handshake, a brush of the arm, a hand pulled back. Each conveys emotion without a single word. For Harry and Meghan, every gesture is magnified because their lives are public property. A single motion, a flicker of expression, becomes a narrative in itself. And in that narrative, the tug of a hand was a headline, a viral clip, and a moment that prompted global speculation all at once. The implications were immediate. Clips circulated on social media within minutes. Hashtags emerged. Fans debated the meaning. Memes were created. Even celebrities weighed in, analyzing the moment from afar. And yet, despite all the speculation, the truth of the interaction remained elusive. Was it a moment of playful disagreement? Or was it a window into a deeper emotional struggle? That ambiguity is what made it irresistible. Curiosity thrives in uncertainty, and millions of people were hooked, watching, waiting, and wondering what would come next. But there's more to it than the public spectacle. Moments like this reveal the dynamics of intimacy under extreme pressure. Harry and Meghan have been navigating not only a complex personal relationship, but also intense public scrutiny for years. Every gesture, every reaction is analyzed, judged, and broadcast. In this context, a simple hand tug becomes a loaded gesture. It's not just about the immediate interaction. It's about years of stress, expectations, and emotional labor carried silently until it surfaces in the most public way possible. And yet, the hand tug wasn't violent or confrontational in the traditional sense. It was subtle, almost elegant in its delivery. That's what made it so compelling. It spoke volumes precisely because it was understated. Anyone can shout, anyone can argue openly. But it takes a special kind of tension to communicate conflict through the slightest movement, a quiet gesture that speaks louder than any words ever could. That tug told a story of power, of boundaries, of personal emotion clashing with public expectation. Experts often note that body language can reveal emotional truth even when words conceal it. In this moment, Meghan's hand movement was a truth teller. Harry's reaction, the micropause, the subtle tightening of his jaw, was another. Together, they created a narrative of tension, of negotiation, and of the silent battles that happen within any relationship, only magnified a million times because the world was watching. And as they settled into their seats, hands no longer touching, the audience's curiosity peaked. Who initiated the tug? What prompted it? Was this a fleeting annoyance or a reflection of months, perhaps years, of underlying tension? The answers were not in the frame, but the questions themselves were enough to keep viewers hooked, analyzing every detail, replaying every clip, and debating endlessly online. Then, just as the stadium fell into the rhythm of the game, something even subtler happened. A glance exchanged across the seats, a half smile, a micro movement of fingers, small, almost imperceptible, yet laden with meaning. It was the kind of detail that could be missed in real time, but once slowed down, dissected, and analyzed, it suggested a dialogue beyond words. An exchange that communicated frustration, affection, independence, or perhaps all three at once. And in that moment, the public realized that this was more than a simple spat. This was a glimpse into the delicate, intricate, and often contradictory dance of a highly scrutinized relationship. It's in these micro moments that we find the most compelling drama, not in shouting, not in confrontation, but in the quiet, subtle signals of emotion. The tug of a hand, a glance, a pause. These are the moments that reveal vulnerability, frustration, and the complexity of human relationships. And when played out on a global stage, in front of millions, these small gestures take on immense significance, shaping narratives, fueling speculation, and capturing the imagination of the audience. But what happened next would push the tension to an entirely new level. A movement, a gesture, something almost imperceptible yet impossible to ignore. It would ignite a conversation that would dominate social media, spark analysis from experts, and leave fans debating what it truly meant. Because this was more than a hand being pulled. It was a signal, a moment of revelation, a story that was only just beginning. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension in the air, even before anyone said a word? That's exactly how the day of the Dodgers game started for Harry and Meghan, although most people wouldn't have noticed it at first glance. The cameras captured the smiles, the wave to fans, the casual banter, the perfect public facade. But beneath that surface, subtle signs hinted at a growing strain, a prelude to what would unfold later. And these signs weren't random. They were the quiet signals of a couple managing both personal frustration and public expectation. The morning began in Los Angeles like any other. Harry and Meghan were reportedly enjoying a private breakfast, reviewing their schedule for the day. But insiders suggest that even during these quiet moments, the energy was different. There were small disagreements over timing, over interactions with staff, over what the public might or might not notice. These minor irritations are common in any relationship, but for a couple whose every move is scrutinized, they carry added weight. Every frown, every hesitation, every subtle sigh was magnified by the knowledge that the world could be watching at any moment. As they left their accommodations to head to the stadium, Meghan reportedly requested a slightly later departure. Harry, according to sources, was eager to get there early, perhaps to enjoy the atmosphere, perhaps to engage with fans. It sounds minor, doesn't it? But the tiniest difference in preference can become a spark under pressure, especially when paired with the constant gaze of cameras and crowds. It's the kind of friction that builds silently, unseen, until it manifests in moments like the hand tug captured later. Even during the car ride to the stadium, subtle signs of tension were present. Observers noted Meghan adjusting herself in the seat repeatedly, a gesture often associated with discomfort or impatience. Harry's posture was stiff, his jaw tight, his gaze occasionally drifting out the window in what some body language experts describe as a moment of internal calculation, weighing words, predicting reactions, anticipating public scrutiny. It's fascinating how small, almost imperceptible cues can reveal the undercurrents of emotion before the public moment even begins. And then there were the interactions with their team. Personal assistants, security staff, and public relations advisors all play a role in managing the couple's appearances. Insiders suggest that minor disagreements over scheduling, photo opportunities, or media coverage had already created an undercurrent of stress. While these moments would likely be invisible to the casual observer, they contributed to an atmosphere charged with anticipation and subtle tension. Every step closer to the stadium, every decision made, added weight to what would later erupt in plain sight. You might wonder why these early moments matter. They matter because human behavior is cumulative. Frustrations accumulate. Stress compounds. Tiny irritations, when left unresolved, create a fertile ground for conflict. By the time Harry and Meghan arrived at the Dodgers game, they were already operating on a high emotional load. And when they stepped into a public setting with thousands of eyes on them, that load manifested in subtle gestures, fleeting expressions, and eventually, in the hand tug that would go viral. Interestingly, the couple's pre-game tension also played out in ways that fans and cameras would rarely catch. Sources report brief moments of silence during their walk to the field, exchanges that seemed innocuous but carried emotional weight. A glance, a sigh, a small gesture, each conveyed feelings that words never fully captured. And when two people navigate a highly publicized relationship, these small gestures are magnified, turning routine interactions into powerful symbols for anyone paying close attention. Some might ask, why would small tensions in private moments matter to us as viewers? Because they often foreshadow public behavior. In human relationships, private stress rarely remains hidden. It leaks into public interactions, sometimes subtly, sometimes dramatically. And when it leaks in a setting as visible as a Dodgers game, the effect is amplified. The audience may only see the surface, the smiles, the waving, the occasional casual touch, but underneath, there's a story unfolding, one that few witnesses fully comprehend at the moment. The tension before the game wasn't only emotional, it was also psychological. Being constantly in the public eye requires mental energy, self-monitoring, and emotional regulation. Harry and Meghan, like many couples under intense scrutiny, had to manage not only their personal feelings, but also the expectations of millions of observers. Each movement, each gesture, each word was filtered through layers of self-control. And when pressure accumulates, even the most disciplined individuals will reveal cracks, sometimes in a glance, sometimes in a gesture, and sometimes in the very public tug of a hand. Fans who observed the couple arriving at the stadium noted subtle signs of unease. Meghan, for instance, reportedly kept her hands close to her body, avoiding unnecessary contact. Harry, conversely, tried to maintain outward composure, his eyes scanning the crowd, his posture deliberate. These contrasts, one partner restrained, the other attempting connection, often precede visible tension. And they make moments like the hand tug both predictable and fascinating, a natural outcome of the private friction that had been quietly building. There's also the question of anticipation. Couples often arrive at events with expectations, consciously or unconsciously. How they imagine the interaction will unfold, how they hope to be perceived, and how they manage those perceptions can create an invisible tension. In this case, Harry may have hoped to project calm, charm, and unity, while Meghan, already under stress, may have wanted a little autonomy, a little personal space in a world that often leaves her feeling exposed. When these expectations collide, the friction becomes inevitable. And let's not forget the role of past experiences. Harry and Meghan's relationship has navigated decades of media attention, family dynamics, and public scrutiny. Every disagreement, every perceived slight, every moment of misunderstanding carries the weight of past conflicts. By the time they approached the stadium, the couple was not only managing the stress of the day, but also the accumulated tension of years. It's easy to see how a small action, a hand held too tightly, a gesture interpreted wrongly, could ignite a visible reaction. The environment itself added pressure. The Dodgers game, a public spectacle with thousands of spectators and millions more watching online, created an atmosphere where normal conflict became amplified. Imagine standing in a room filled with people, all eyes on you, expecting perfection. How would you handle minor disagreements then? For Harry and Meghan, every motion was scrutinized, every reaction magnified. The stage was set, not for a casual outing, but for an emotionally charged moment caught for posterity. And then there were the micro-interactions before they entered the stadium. A small disagreement over how to approach fans, a misalignment in timing when stepping onto the field, even a brief difference in opinion on seating arrangements. All of these tiny details contributed to a crescendo of tension. In human relationships, it's often these seemingly insignificant moments that compound, creating a perfect storm for conflict. For Harry and Meghan, the storm would erupt shortly after they entered the public eye. So, when they finally stepped onto the stadium grounds, the tension wasn't new. It had been building quietly, invisibly, in the hours leading up to that moment. What the cameras captured wasn't an isolated incident. It was the visible culmination of private dynamics, simmering emotions, and the stress of a life constantly observed. And for the audience, it would look sudden, explosive, and dramatic, even though, in reality, it had been simmering long before anyone realized. And that's what makes this story so compelling. Because the visible hand tug, the subtle expressions, the fleeting gestures, they were the tip of an iceberg. Beneath the surface lay hours of private tension, years of accumulated stress, and decades of scrutiny. The public sees the hand pull and wonders what it means. The truth, however, is that it represents far more than a momentary disagreement. It's the manifestation of private struggle in a world that demands perfection, charm, and poise at all times. But what happened in the stadium, once they stepped into the crowd, would take this tension from private undercurrents to a full-blown public spectacle, one that would captivate fans worldwide and ignite endless debate. And in that transition, the story truly begins. Have you ever witnessed a moment where a single sentence, barely audible, carries more weight than any gesture or glance? That's exactly what happened at the Dodgers game when Harry and Meghan began speaking, or more accurately, when the first words of their argument were exchanged. It wasn't a shouting match. It wasn't dramatic in the traditional sense. But the words, combined with tone, timing, and subtle expressions, revealed a depth of tension that few outside observers could have anticipated. And the world, watching through the lens of a camera, hung on every syllable. The argument began almost imperceptibly. Harry leaned slightly toward Meghan, his voice low, almost conversational, attempting to steer their interaction toward normalcy. But Meghan's response was clipped, deliberate, a verbal cue that the boundaries of patience were already being tested. "Don't hold my hands," she said quietly, yet firmly. The words were calm, but carried unmistakable weight. In the public eye, where even a whisper is amplified, the statement resonated immediately. Think about that phrase for a moment. Simple, direct, yet explosive. Don't hold my hands. It sounds like a minor irritation, a fleeting request. But within that brief sentence lies emotion, resistance, frustration, and perhaps even anger. It's a demand for space in the midst of scrutiny. And in that moment, it wasn't just a plea, it was a declaration. Meghan was asserting control over her personal boundaries, and Harry, caught slightly off guard, had to adjust his behavior accordingly. Harry's initial reaction was telling. His eyes widened slightly, a micro-expression of surprise that most casual observers might miss, but body language experts immediately notice. There was a brief pause, less than a second, during which his mind raced, weighing his next move. Should he pull back completely? Should he respond with humor, with reassurance, with a gentle attempt to defuse tension? In those tiny fractions of a second, the dynamics of their relationship were on full display, unfolding live in front of thousands of spectators and millions of viewers online. It's remarkable how much can be communicated in a single exchange. Words are just one part of the equation. Tone, volume, pitch, timing, and accompanying gestures all work together to convey emotion. When Meghan said, "Don't hold my hands," she didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture aggressively. But the subtle tightening of her jaw, the brief flick of her eyes, and the slight backward pull of her hand amplified the meaning exponentially. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed innocuous. To those paying attention, it was explosive. The context of the statement matters too. In a normal private setting, words like this might be brushed off, forgotten within minutes. But under the glare of public scrutiny, every word becomes a headline. Every syllable is analyzed for hidden meaning. And in this case, the phrase became symbolic, a tangible moment representing years of stress, public expectation, and the constant balancing act of intimacy under observation. Immediately after the first words, a subtle shift occurred in body language. Harry's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if acknowledging the boundary, while Meghan's posture remained guarded, almost defensive. Their feet, subtle in motion, shifted in alignment, an almost imperceptible distance growing between them. It was as if the air itself had changed. The tension didn't dissipate. It thickened, manifesting physically in the subtle choreography of human behavior. Fans watching online reacted instantly. Clips of the interaction circulated within minutes, and hashtags began trending worldwide. Some viewers interpreted the words as playful banter, a minor disagreement, harmless in context. Others, however, saw the statement as a sign of deeper discord, a manifestation of private frustrations spilling into the public sphere. And experts began analyzing everything. Meghan's micro-expressions, Harry's eye movements, the cadence of speech, and even the positioning of their bodies relative to each other. Every detail became a piece of a larger puzzle. The tension escalated further when Harry responded. His voice, calm but firm, carried a hint of frustration and disbelief. He didn't shout. He didn't escalate dramatically. But the subtle shift in tone, the slight emphasis on certain words, indicated that the request had touched a sensitive nerve. Observers noted a contrast, Meghan's assertiveness versus Harry's controlled, almost measured response. That contrast, minor as it might seem, created a dynamic that would captivate audiences for hours, days, and even weeks. This is where the layers of their relationship become apparent. In public, they are expected to maintain poise, charm, and composure. Behind closed doors, they are human, navigating emotions, frustrations, and interpersonal conflicts. When the public sees an exchange like this, it becomes more than a private disagreement. It becomes a story, a narrative, a window into the complexities of maintaining intimacy under constant surveillance. And there's another fascinating element: timing. The argument unfolded during a pause in the game, a moment when attention could have been elsewhere. The juxtaposition of the normalcy of the stadium atmosphere with the private tension between Harry and Meghan created a dramatic irony that the public couldn't resist. Fans were simultaneously observing the game, enjoying the crowd, and witnessing an intimate dispute unravel live. The contrast heightened curiosity and engagement, drawing viewers deeper into the story. Let's consider the emotional undertone for a moment. Meghan's words, though brief, conveyed vulnerability and assertiveness at the same time. She was defending her personal space while also communicating boundaries in a setting where boundaries are constantly tested. Harry's reaction reflected a mix of surprise, concern, and perhaps even a fleeting sense of guilt. That interplay, assertiveness and reaction, boundary setting and response, is what makes human conflict both relatable and riveting. And in this case, it played out on a global stage, magnifying every nuance. Observers also noted that the argument was punctuated by nonverbal cues. A brief shift in seating posture, a flicker of the eyes, the micro-adjustment of hands. These signals, often invisible in private moments, were captured for posterity. They became evidence not just of a disagreement, but of the layered emotional complexity that exists in every relationship. And because Harry and Meghan live under constant scrutiny, these tiny signals took on extraordinary significance, offering the public a rare glimpse into a normally hidden dimension of their life together. But the first words weren't the end. They were the beginning. In human interactions, the opening statement of a disagreement sets the tone, influences the emotional trajectory, and signals the potential intensity of what follows. And in this case, "Don't Hold My Hands" served as both an anchor and a spark. It anchored the immediate conflict, while sparking curiosity, speculation, and engagement among those watching. The phrase became symbolic, encapsulating the tension between public expectation and private emotion, control and submission, visibility and vulnerability. Soon after, a small but telling escalation occurred. Harry attempted to reach for Meghan's hand again, perhaps as a gesture of reassurance, perhaps instinctively, perhaps without thinking. Meghan pulled back once more, subtly but decisively. The repetition of this motion, small in isolation but significant in sequence, reinforced the narrative that tension was not fleeting, it was ongoing. The public, analyzing the video, recognized the pattern, an interaction layered with emotion, resistance, and the delicate negotiation of personal boundaries. And as they continued toward their seats, the tension remained. The atmosphere shifted, not through dramatic shouting or confrontation, but through subtleties, pauses, glances, hand movements, body alignment. Every micro-interaction became amplified in the eyes of the audience, creating a sense of anticipation and suspense. People didn't just watch, they leaned in, analyzing every second, trying to predict what would come next. What makes this moment remarkable is that it's both universal and extraordinary. Universal, because all human relationships experience friction, disagreement, and negotiation. Extraordinary, because Harry and Meghan's lives exist in a pressure cooker of fame, media scrutiny, and public expectation. A private disagreement becomes a global spectacle, a single sentence becomes a headline, and a hand tug becomes a viral moment dissected endlessly online. And just when it seemed that the words had set the stage and the tension had plateaued, another subtle but dramatic gesture occurred. Meghan's gaze shifted, Harry's expression hardened slightly, and the distance between them, physically and emotionally, became palpable. It was almost imperceptible, yet it carried an unmistakable signal. The argument was not over. The audience, watching online and in person, could feel it. And that feeling, that anticipation, created a suspense that would hold everyone's attention for the remainder of the game. Because in that moment, one thing was clear. The first words exchanged were just the beginning. What came next would deepen the story, reveal more layers of tension, and leave viewers debating what really happened long after the game ended. And in the world of Harry and Meghan, every tiny exchange carries weight far beyond the immediate moment, a truth the cameras had captured in stunning detail. Have you ever watched a couple argue and realized that sometimes the words matter far less than the way they move, the way they breathe, or the way they position themselves? At the Dodgers game, Harry and Meghan's argument was a masterclass in body language, an intricate dance of tension, restraint, and subtle emotion. Every gesture, posture, and micro-expression told a story that words could never fully capture. And for millions watching, analyzing, and theorizing, these silent signals were the most compelling part of the spectacle. The first thing to notice is posture. Harry, typically relaxed in casual settings, displayed a slight forward lean throughout much of the interaction. It was almost imperceptible, but to the trained eye, it communicated focus, engagement, and, crucially, a degree of assertiveness. He was leaning in, physically reaching toward Meghan, a subconscious attempt to bridge the emotional distance forming between them. In contrast, Meghan's posture was slightly withdrawn. Her shoulders were angled back, her torso subtly shifting away, signaling discomfort, resistance, or the need for personal space. The interplay of these postures created a silent narrative: connection versus boundary, engagement versus withdrawal. Harry's forward lean suggested a desire to maintain closeness, to reconnect or reassure. Meghan's subtle retreat was a boundary-setting act, an assertion of autonomy in a moment charged with scrutiny. And because this interaction was happening in public, under the gaze of thousands in the stadium and millions online, the tension was magnified. Every slight motion became a statement, a wordless sentence in a conversation the audience could read and interpret endlessly. Eye contact was another crucial factor. Meghan's gaze shifted frequently, not just toward Harry but across the stadium, toward friends, and toward the crowd. These shifts were brief, almost imperceptible, but they indicated a desire for mental escape, a search for grounding outside the immediate emotional conflict. Harry's eyes, by contrast, were primarily fixed on Meghan, following her movements, tracking her gestures, and gauging her reactions. The contrast between the two gaze patterns created an asymmetry that heightened tension. One partner was outward-looking, emotionally self-protective. The other was inward-focused, responsive, and engaged. Hands were, of course, central to the argument. We've already seen the dramatic tug, but there were additional gestures worth noting. Meghan's hands remained active in subtle ways, adjusting her hair, brushing the armrest, lightly gripping her bag. These microactions are often subconscious methods of self-soothing or signaling emotional state. Harry's hands alternated between small reaches toward Meghan and resting in poised positions, conveying a controlled tension, an internal effort to maintain calm while responding to the unspoken signals he was receiving. Foot placement, too, played a subtle but revealing role. Meghan's legs were angled slightly away from Harry, a classic sign of emotional and physical distance. She shifted weight from one foot to another, small movements that suggested discomfort or impatience. Harry, meanwhile, positioned himself to mirror her stance at times, yet subtly angled closer, attempting to maintain a connective line. These tiny shifts, while nearly invisible in real time, speak volumes in terms of relational dynamics, signaling approach, withdrawal, engagement, or resistance. Facial expressions were equally telling. Meghan's face displayed microfurrows along her brow, a slight tightening around the eyes, and fleeting lip movements that betrayed tension. Harry's expressions were more controlled but included a subtle jaw tightening and brief eye squints, signaling surprise, concern, or mild frustration. These facial microexpressions, imperceptible to most, were captured perfectly by the stadium cameras and became the focus of expert analysis online. Another element of body language that emerged was timing, the micropauses between gestures. Meghan would pull back, then hold a subtle pause, her eyes darting momentarily. Harry would respond, matching or countering the pause with his own micromovement. These timing cues, tiny fractions of a second, indicate negotiation, hesitation, and emotional calibration. They are often subconscious but reveal the internal processes at play: evaluation, emotional regulation, and prediction of the other's response. Then there's the concept of mirroring. Couples often unconsciously mirror each other's body language to foster connection. In this argument, there was only partial mirroring. When Harry reached slightly forward, Meghan sometimes mirrored by leaning forward slightly, but just enough to maintain her personal boundary. When Harry adjusted his hands, Meghan's micromovements reflected subtle disengagement. This asymmetry indicated tension and imbalance, the physical embodiment of conflict, disagreement, and negotiation occurring in real time. Even breathing patterns were telling. Meghan's breaths appeared slightly faster and shallower during the interaction, subtle signs of stress or agitation. Harry's breathing remained controlled, steady, but every exhale seemed calculated, almost a method of self-regulation under scrutiny. Breathing communicates emotion at a level beyond words. It signals readiness, tension, and response. And in this scenario, the contrast between their respiratory patterns added an invisible layer of drama. almost imperceptible to most viewers, but revealing to those looking closely. Proxemics, the study of personal space, also played a role. The slight increase in physical distance, the positioning of shoulders and torso, all communicated relational dynamics. Harry's attempts to reduce the distance were met with Meghan's subtle resistance. The space between them was more than just physical. It represented emotional distance, personal boundaries, and the tension of negotiating intimacy in public. Every inch of space, every shift in angle, became a data point for observers trying to decode the moment. And of course, there was synchrony, or lack thereof. Couples in harmony often move in coordinated ways. Gestures align, posture mirrors, breathing synchronizes. In this case, the lack of full synchrony highlighted the tension. While small moments of alignment occurred, a shared glance, a fleeting smile, a brief alignment of body angles, they were interrupted consistently by micro-movements of disengagement, subtle retractions, or protective gestures. The contrast between synchronized and asynchronous movements revealed both connection and disconnection simultaneously. Body language experts quickly weighed in online. Meghan's slight withdrawals, Harry's controlled advances, and the micro-expressions captured by the cameras were dissected, analyzed, and interpreted. Articles, posts, and videos proliferated, each offering theories. Meghan establishes autonomy with a simple hand pull. Harry shows concern and attempts reconciliation through subtle leaning. The tension is amplified by public scrutiny and accumulated stress. And while viewers debated the details, the general consensus was clear. This was an emotionally charged moment that spoke volumes without a single shout or raised voice. Interestingly, humor also made subtle appearances in body language. Harry attempted a small, half-smile during one micro-interaction, a possible effort to diffuse tension, connect, or lighten the emotional load. Meghan's response was minimal but included a micro-nod and a slight tightening around the lips, signaling acknowledgement but not fully engaging. This interplay of subtle humor and restrained response added nuance to the narrative. It wasn't all conflict. There were moments of negotiation, attempts at reconciliation, and human complexity layered atop tension. And then there was timing of gaze. Meghan's eyes occasionally flicked toward the crowd, perhaps seeking validation, grounding, or distraction from the tension. Harry's eyes remained predominantly focused on her, tracking micro-movements, gauging reactions, and predicting emotional responses. These gaze patterns, minor as they seem, communicate intent, attention, and emotional priorities. In this case, highlighting the divergence in focus between connection and self-regulation. All of these subtle cues, posture, gaze, hand movement, micro-expression, foot placement, breathing, proxemics, and timing, combined to create a moment of high drama, tension, and human vulnerability. They told a story that words alone could not. A story of negotiation, boundary setting, stress management, and emotional honesty unfolding in real time, under the gaze of a global audience. And yet, despite the analytical lens through which we view it, the interaction remained deeply human. Everyone watching, consciously or not, recognized something familiar. The subtle tensions, the micro-conflicts, the wordless negotiations that happen in every relationship. The difference was that in this case, those micro-moments were amplified to a global scale, dissected frame by frame, and turned into a viral narrative that would dominate headlines. But the real drama hadn't reached its peak yet. Every micro-gesture, every subtle glance, every shift in posture was building towards something larger. A climax that would leave the audience questioning not only the dynamics of this public interaction, but also the deeper emotional landscape of a couple living under unprecedented scrutiny. Because what was about to happen next, the next movement, the next gesture, the next pause, would take this silent, subtle story and escalate it in ways no one could have predicted. Every argument has a turning point, a moment when subtle tension escalates into something impossible to ignore. At the Dodgers game, that moment came quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet its impact reverberated instantly. It wasn't a shout, a slam, or a public display of anger. No, it was far more potent. A gesture, a glance, a spike in emotional energy that altered the course of the interaction and, for millions watching, became the focal point of speculation and fascination. It began with a movement so slight that it might have been missed without the camera's precise framing. Harry, attempting to re-establish connection, reached out toward Meghan once more, his hand hovering over hers with a subtle pause. Meghan, already signaling through body language that she needed distance, made a micro-adjustment, pulling her hand back slightly and leaning just enough to assert autonomy. That single movement was loaded with meaning, a push and pull, a negotiation of space, a visible manifestation of emotional tension. Here's what makes this moment extraordinary. In private, similar gestures happen countless times, unnoticed. In public, under the gaze of thousands and the scrutiny of millions online, each micro-movement becomes amplified. Meghan's hand pull wasn't just a gesture, it was a statement. It was clarity in motion. Don't touch, don't control, don't overstep. And Harry's response, that brief pause and subtle forward lean, communicated surprise, recalibration, and the mental processing of her message in real time.